Hey, it's been a while since I did a check in, and I thought that now would be a good time to do so. I just finished working out, so I feel a little bit flustered. I got off work as well, and I've been here in New York City. I'm going to leave in a couple of days, and it's been a really insightful time. Since the last time we spoke, I believe it was 2022. Let me just take a look at my history here to see. I think it was a complete year. Yeah, October 13th of 2022. So not quite 2 years, but about 2 months shy of 2 years. And I believe we talked about if anyone was inherently evil, and we discussed the concept of people being born with certain tendencies, or if people develop them through socialization or trauma. And since then, a lot has transpired, both in the world and in my life as well. I want to start off by saying that something I've noticed about things in the last couple of years is that with time comes more clarity. They say everything's 2020 in hindsight, and I do believe that to some extent, but I also think time can blur things, and that's something I talked about with the nostalgia video last week, is how sometimes when we are in the thick of things in the moment, it can feel as if the past was this idyllic thing, and it may be, it may not be. But sometimes people get wrapped up too much in this idea of the past, the same way they get wrapped up in this potential future that may or might not happen. One thing I will say though is it's easy when you have not had certain experiences to desire or speak on certain things, but with experience comes more caution sometimes. Sometimes it deepens our desire for certain things. And another thing that I want to touch on, I'm just looking back at past uploads. Give me just 1 second. I spilled protein all over the table because I was trying to make a protein shake, and it was just very annoying. So, also, a couple of weeks back, we discussed not letting your heart be hardened, which is really near and dear to my heart because in a world where we have so much negativity, and just I understand how in this world it's easy to feel like upset with the conditions, especially if you feel like you've done everything right and it seems like people are getting ahead who aren't doing the right thing. And then some people just give up hope, and they find it, instead of getting better or being hopeful, they just get bitter. And that's something that I remember just feeling laid on my heart when I got here to discuss. Another thing is, and I'm looking down at my phone to look at previous uploads because I wanted to touch on some of the things. I don't think I'm going to be able to touch on a year's worth of uploads, but I'll try. As far as this election is going, I haven't been following it the last couple of weeks working out here just because I've been focused on work. But I, again, always preface this, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, and so I don't have a dog in this fight. However, I do feel like this election has been really weird because you have Joe Biden who dropped out, and it's crazy that he's running the country still, and he knows he's not fit to run for presidency, but he's still the president of the United States making the decisions. And then you also have an assassination attempt on Trump, which some people think it was staged to get him more support. And it's just crazy to me, some of the tactics they've used to try to get people to vote on either side. Each election gets more and more theatrical. And then before that, I also talked about just the panic around the elections and even the Long Legs movie. If you haven't seen it, then maybe shut your ears to this part. But Long Legs came out last month, and it was about a serial killer. Nicolas Cage played this serial killer. He was very androgynous, and he preyed on families with a daughter usually, and he used mind control through the dolls. They never really explained the quote unquote science or if it was magic, but he was a Satanist. And throughout the film, they constantly hailed the devil, and he, even though he killed himself when he was caught, still, we found out the main character's mother had actually became his accomplice to save her daughter's life, and the daughter was the main character in the movie. Just one second, I'm getting a call. And so it was very interesting. It was definitely a psychological thriller. All right. And then card shuffling and mimics. So on TikTok, which I haven't also been watching, but when I was deep into watching TikToks, I get a lot of paranormal TikToks, and something that was really interesting to me in the paranormal TikTok world was people talking about quote unquote mimic. So a mimic is basically the same thing as a doppelganger, except people see somebody or hear a voice that's familiar to them of someone living, but it's not the person. It's what they call a mimic, like a familiar spirit that's trying to lure them for some reason. And it gets kind of wild, but some people say that it's really common in Appalachia. And then as far as card shuffling, that's the concept that people during the nighttime, let's say in the deep south, usually this is where it happens, but I heard other people saying this happened to them in other parts of the country that are not the deep south. They have been somewhere at night and a location has popped up that wasn't there the next day, and it's almost as if things have moved around, like they experienced something that was almost in another dimension. It's almost like if one night you go out and you find this cool coffee shop and you interact with people, you have these deep conversations, and then the next day you look and it's just an open field of land and you can't find it anymore. That's pretty much the concept of card shuffling. Another thing I heard a lot about was people saying they were seeing demon faces, and they actually came up with a disorder for this, but some people are claiming that they were seeing certain people's faces look demonic. I understand that some people can experience psychosis and they may see things that aren't there, but this has become more common. It kind of reminds me of last year. You had the plane lady who freaked out on the plane, and there was a lot of speculation about why she freaked out. Later, she came out and apologized for her behavior, and the whole story boiled down to her reaction being that um, I forgot what she said, but it was something really simplistic. But a lot of people have conspiracy theories around that. And then that was that. So another thing is difficulty finding a new job, yet there's massive job growth. So if any of you have been looking for a job, I know I have been looking for another job. I have been thankful to have the job I have, but it is a lot traveling, always being on the road. It sounds cool and it is cool at first, but the older I get, the more I realize that it would be nice to work remotely. I don't miss the commute to the office. I don't miss putting gas in my car to drive 30 minutes to sit in traffic to an hour. However, sometimes having to get on a plane, whether it's winter, whether it's summer, and certain places I work, I'm going to admit, like here was a better experience because I didn't have to worry about driving. I walked everywhere in New York. But some places I go, it's a food desert. There's not a lot of good food options if you're trying to eat healthy. It's hard working certain hours because my job, I could work weekends, I could work night shifts. They do whatever they want with my schedule. So I'm at a place where I would like more of a steady routine and a better work life balance. But if you're looking for another job or you don't have a job and you're trying to get one, they say that it's been harder for people to find jobs because a lot of times your resume is going through a bot before it even sees human eyes. Or what might happen is the job posting you get is actually not an open position. It could be the company did put it out there, but then they decided to fill it with someone internal because most times people feel comfortable going with someone they already know than someone they don't know. And then there's also a lot of scams. Like I was updating my resume and putting out my information, and I got a text message. And I'm really weary of text messages or calls from numbers I don't know telling me about jobs, even emails. And so, I asked them for more information, and they asked me to provide my social security number. And as soon as they said that, I'm like, they're trying to steal my identity, probably. So I was quick to be skeptical of that. Let's see. So I also talked about scary TikToks at night and being careful about what I post. So I don't know if it's just me, but if I watch TikTok at night, even YouTube, but not as much as YouTube because YouTube does have shorts, but unless you're first opening the app, they don't usually just randomly shuffle. But with TikTok, if I'm not careful, I can go on it and I'll be in a hotel room by myself, and then I'll get these like really scary stories, and then I believe that a lot of times what we think can manifest. So I don't want to be in a mindset of fear and then like have nightmares that night or attract anything to me. But I will say that a lot of theories I've heard on TikTok are things that I feel have happened to me without the influence of someone telling me something. For instance, people talking about how if you ask someone a question, a dream, that it doesn't go well. And I can say that anytime I've ever had a lucid dream and I became cognizant of that, and then I made it clear to another person in my dream that I knew I was awake, I feel like the dream went sideways and turned into sleep paralysis. And then as far as being careful what I post, I just mean that more so not on YouTube because I feel like I've always tried to exercise caution with that. Even though when I was younger, I did just kind of post straight from the heart, and I still do. But you do have to be mindful about how your posts are going to affect others. But I mean more like on my personal social media sites. And I give this advice to anyone because I do believe that evil eye or what people call monitoring spirits is real. And there are people who do watch your content that you post, whether it's a selfie, a family photo, a quote, whatever. And they're not always watching to support you or because they're curious. Some people watch with malicious intent, unfortunately. And I feel, at least I'm sensitive to that. One sign that someone may just not have the best intention is if they're the first one to constantly view your stories. Like I'm using like Instagram or Facebook, for example. They're the first one to view it. They never miss one of those. But whenever you make a post about a milestone or something, they never like any of your post because it shows that they're invested, but maybe they're not invested for the right reasons. I'm not saying people are obliged to like everything you post, but there are people that are super nosy and even are hating on people and following them for the wrong reasons. So, food noise and muting it. So, this one's near and dear to my heart because, as I've mentioned, since I began my weight loss journey last year, I lost over 80 pounds. I'm not sure what I weigh right now because I've been in New York and I haven't had a scale. I've walked everywhere. But, for me, this is a big deal because losing weight is one of those things that for me has never been easy. And I am someone who does seem to be able to pick up a good routine, but finally being able to mute out that food noise of overeating or even just not eating the healthiest and picking up a routine has been so helpful. And it's been life changing to drop all of that weight. Like I'm finally back to where I was in high school at almost 30. So that's been really good. The false light. So the false light is just another way of saying that I feel in the supernatural paranormal community or when people talk about phenomenon, a lot of times people describe almost like this light. Even sometimes we think about false religions, they talk about like an angel that came to them. And it almost seems to me a fallen angel. And a lot of times I've heard the phrase, don't walk into the light. So I do believe that light generally is tied to things that are good, like and holy, like God and Christ. But there also is a false light, a light that is not of God, that is used to deceive people. And unfortunately, if a person is not discerning, they can fall victim to that false light. let's see, the inflation and recession. So, as I mentioned earlier, with the whole lack of open jobs, we also are in a recession and we also are experiencing mass inflation. So the cost of living keeps skyrocketing, but wages are not going up. At my job, they haven't given anyone a raise in 3 years, which is crazy. And even when they did give us a raise, this is before we were acquired by a larger company, it was only a 2 cent raise for me. And um, yeah, the cost of living is going up. Like it's no secret, I still live with my family, and one day I want to have my own place, but at the same time, I'm not willing to move out if I'm not ready yet. Just to say I did it, if you know, I've just got the crazy prices out there. Vortexes on Earth in my experience in Sedona. So I went to Sedona back in May of this year, I believe it was. Was it May? Yeah, it was May. And I was only 3 days working there, and I was able to do a lot of exploring. And I had never known of vortexes or all of that behind it until way later. And I found that places like Sedona, Mount Shasta, I believe Ashland, North Carolina, which I've never been, where else? Stonehenge, haven't been there before. They're thought to be these great energy centers because of intersections of ley lines. And the way I best had it described is it's kind of like looking at a healthy person. A lot of times where there's a vortex, the land is very beautiful and it's very healthy. And a lot of people find these areas to be healing. I found it to be healing. Of course, I like nature and I like hiking. So the Northern Lights frequent sightings and the death of celebrity culture. So I haven't been hearing too much about it now, but the Northern Lights have been getting lower and lower and more commonly seen in places they wouldn't normally be seen. And to me, this is a sign that our electromagnetic field is not as strong. And I think it's more of an omen than anything. I mean, it's cool to see the Northern Lights in a place that you wouldn't normally see it, especially if you're traveling. You have to travel to Alaska or somewhere in the North Pole to see it. I when I went to Fairbanks, Alaska a couple of years ago, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna see the Northern Lights," and I was excited. But unfortunately, I never saw anything. But apparently, in Missouri, I was so mad because I was there, but I missed it. A lot of people around me saw the Northern Lights, and that was back in May. The 2024 solar eclipse and patterns throughout American history. So in April, we had the Great American Solar Eclipse. It came 7 years after the other Great American Solar Eclipse in 2017, and it took the opposite path of it and it formed an X. There were lesser eclipses that happened between that, but it was interesting because some of the town names and the pathway of it aligned with the New Madrid fault line. So that was definitely fascinating, and it does make me wonder if we're due for an earthquake there, because they say it could happen anytime, and if it did, it would be drastic. And last time it happened, it just wasn't that populated. So it's interesting because that was near St. Louis, but yet it shook church bells in Philadelphia, and they felt it all the way up in northeastern Canada. So I could only imagine what the magnitude would be. Everyone's always focused on California and the San Andreas fault line, and now I hear more concern about Cascadia in the Pacific Northwest, because that would affect Oregon, Washington, and like the Vancouver area. And then also, we're hearing all the time about Yellowstone, but the New Madrid quake would be crazy as well. And interestingly enough, before it happened, about that same year, like several months later, they had like a solar eclipse that crossed that same path our solar eclipse crossed this year, and then several months later they had the great earthquakes. So the 440 hertz effects on the psyche. So a lot of modern music and TV's shows are tuned to that frequency, and that frequency is not necessarily the healthiest for us. It's believed that certain frequencies benefit and some of them don't. And so it's fascinating that as a society, our media have switched to that. So Dan Schneider and the Baltimore Bridge collapse. I feel like I'm going back in time, but Dan Schneider and Diddy, all I can say is that they were predators, um, pedos, and there's been a lot of witnesses that have come forward about how they were treated and what they experienced. Dan Schneider was on Nickelodeon, and he's apparently had a foot fetish, and then people were saying it's weird because the Nickelodeon logo looks like a foot, so that's disturbing. And then Diddy, of course, he's in trouble for a lot of things with the whole evidence Cassie put out against him. There were rumors swirling about him and TD Jakes, but I never saw anyone produce any actual evidence of it, so it's hearsay until proven otherwise. But I'm not shocked by any of it. We know Hollywood is known for a lot of predatory behavior, and the Baltimore Bridge collapse. So they talk about like a weak infrastructure, but also some people speculated that this could have been an inside job or even could have been like an attack, kind of like how we've had other strange things happen lately without much information being given. So another video was in the passage of time is different in other realms. I'm sorry. When I said the words passage of time, it made me think of videos making fun of Kamala Harris saying passage of time. But anyways, the passage of time in different is different in other realms simply means that some people have have noticed that in different places, people who claim to have time traveled, people who have claimed to have had experiences, even like what I was talking about card shuffling, it's almost like time passed differently. It makes me think of that scripture how like 1,000 years is a day with the Lord. So we know that there is something in the spirit realm where time is different than what we experience. The end of postmodernity and the age of mysticism. So we've moved into a time where we had we had the dark ages where people, of course, they were practicing the old religions. We had the um, period of the church where the church was the dominant force. And when I say church, I'm talking more from a Western perspective, but like the Catholic Church was more of the sole authority. Then we had an era where it was more like science was the dominant way that things were thought to be, and people adhered to that. That fell out of favor with post-modernity, and people had their own truths, a lot of moral relativism. And now I feel we're back in an era, because I believe life is cyclical in many ways, where people are honing in more on mysticism, whether it's alternative medicine, whether it's um, increasing paganism, whether it's people adopting more ritualistic views of the Bible. I do feel that we're in an age of mysticism, and with that comes its own degree of change. Cell phone outages and other strange activity. So, as far as cell phone outages go, this was back in March when this happened, and that was with the AT&T, T-Mobile, and other carriers who had no service. I remember that because I was working in Alabama. I was working night shift and no one had service. And then they blamed it on a bad update. Like they blamed the the CrowdStrike thing that crippled Microsoft. They blamed that also on a bad update, which, as I've mentioned, I work in tech, and one of my jobs, the reason I travel so much is because I help hospitals when they go live with their electronic medical records. And so when they go live, which is what happened in these instances with their software, it's been tested many, many times. There's been classes and trainings they've taken. So the fact they claim that they brought it live without testing it to me just doesn't add up. Hi, Testimonies with Jesus. Thank you for tuning in. So definitely something to me that seems really suspicious. These stories we've been told, to me, either I almost think that it could be a foreign enemy. We're constantly hearing, like, I think I heard that Trump's campaign was blaming Iran for hacking. And we know there's all this tension between Israel, Gaza, and, well, Palestine and Iran. And we also know there's tension growing with China and Russia. They've been flying planes and ships closer and closer, like by Alaska. And even North Korea. So who knows what's really going on with a lot of these outages? And they could use this during the elections if they wanted to say that that's the reason why so and so won, or maybe who knows. But I do find all of this interesting. Like, how is our cybersecurity so weak as a country? Let's see. So, tips I've learned over a decade for improving your quality of life. So, unfortunately, my memory on this video back in February, I don't remember the tips I gave, but I will say that really the main thing is your spiritual walk. The next thing is simply understanding who you are in Christ and understanding who you are, letting go of ego and really dedicating yourself to self improvement and realizing not to take things too personal, because that was a big problem I had. Getting away from being a people pleaser, because unfortunately, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you learn, no matter how much work you put in, it's never going to be good enough for everyone. And some people just are critics. They like to criticize and they like to hurt others because they're miserable and they want others to be miserable, and misery loves company. And a lot of times, ego is our own enemy because it makes us miserable, because we're reaching for perfectionism and we're reaching for something that's not necessarily tangible, but we think it's tangible. So I would just say with all of that, that as long as you are putting your best effort forward, as long as you are walking with Christ and you really are trying to do the best you can, I don't think you can go wrong. We all make mistakes, we all fall short, but we shouldn't beat ourselves up over the few things that we lack. We're all a work in progress. No one's perfect. And no matter how many years go by, I think people get prideful sometimes. They get this false sense of security, and I don't ever want to be that way. So while it's probably not what I said in that video, I'm sure I said something else. I just wanted to give that advice at this point. Antarctica and Hollow Earth. So I love theories on Hollow Earth and Antarctica because Antarctica is always somewhere I've wanted to visit. Penguins are my favorite animal. And a lot of people think that if there was a Hollow Earth, that the way to enter it is through the North or the South Pole. And there are stories that people have entered it through Antarctica. And even movies like The Thing or Alien versus Predator, they've hinted at the idea of something coming from another planet and dwelling in Antarctica and there being pyramids. And I remember when Buzz Aldrin posted that picture, like there was a great evil and it looked like a pyramid, and then Scopes debunked it and like that's not what he meant, but it did look like a pyramid. They said it was mountains. Who really knows? Because to take a cruise in Antarctica is $30,000, and even if you do take a cruise to Antarctica, you're not going to get to see the massive landscape. It's actually the biggest desert in the world, even though it's made of ice. It's a tundra, and scientists, of course, get to go to Antarctica, but if they are studying it, and again, it's a big continent, so they're relegated to a certain area. Leave the world behind and the effects of all systems being down. So it's interesting that that movie came out at the end of 2023, and pretty much they never explained what exactly was happening in that movie. I know the Obamas had some involvement in that film, and what I will say about it was that they were hinting that a foreign invader had taken control of our systems, and it was causing mass chaos. Like all of the cars were no longer able to run. They were able to use technology like they did in Cuba, which caused one of the characters' nose to bleed. It was just a very I didn't like the characters they had in the movie. I thought that the movie itself was lacking, but the concept was interesting. And I definitely think it was no mistake they put it out, and then we're seeing all of these cyber attacks, data breaches, and all constant rumors that foreign enemies are able to infiltrate us this easily. Theories of Hollow Earth the Titans explored in the Monsterverse. So I did talk a little bit about Hollow Earth a few minutes ago, but what I will add to this, since it is the Monsterverse, and I am a big fan of Godzilla and Kong in the Monsterverse, is simply that I think that truth is stranger than fiction, and that a lot of these films they use to drop hints of the truth. Of course, is it sci-fi? Is it stretched? And they really run with the idea of there being a hollow earth, and the idea that there are titans that live in this hollow earth, and that at one point the titans preceded us. And it kind of goes along with ideas people have about the book of Enoch and Noah's time, and even some people think of as a pre-Adamic age. And even some of the stories people have told who claim that they went to hollow earth and saw titans. Let's see. All right, and then homeless crisis and San Francisco cleaning up streets. So yeah, that was crazy last year. What happened with San Francisco? They had the Chinese president come, Xi Jinping, and they were able to clean up the streets of San Francisco. If you've visited San Francisco recently, you'll know that there's a lot of homelessness going on there. California itself has a lot, just a big problem with homelessness. The most homeless people are in the state of California, and it's a beautiful state. It's my favorite state. It's near and dear to my heart. I've lived in LA. I've lived in Sacramento before, and I frequent California a lot. But they do have a massive problem with homelessness, and they have a lot of policy problems. And it's honestly running the state, and it's to the point where a lot of people who are California natives are fleeing the state because simply it's just not worth the price that they're paying for it. But it's sad that they were able to clean up the streets for the Chinese president, but they can't do it for the citizens. And people are paying all of this money, but yet they're not able to enjoy what they're paying for. Granted, they do have nice weather, they do have nice land, but a lot of people are not fans of the current governor, Gavin Newsom, who was responsible when they asked, how could you clean up the streets for Xi Jinping, but you can't do it for the people? And he said, yep, they did intentionally clean it up for him. And people wondered, where did the homeless people go? Because they just all disappeared. So I see testimonies where Jesus said there were rumors Hitler went to Hollow Earth. Yes, so that was one of the theories. Hi, Edward Tam. Hope you're doing well. So yes, that was one of the theories about Hollow Earth with Hitler and the Nazis, is that, he essentially was a mystic. He was very much into paganism, and he was a part of the real society. He had a medium that he kind of had as a spiritual advisor, and they claim that they actually did go to Hollow Earth. They were seeking basically world domination through the occult. And it's just the whole story of the Nazis to me is really interesting, because it's almost like what you would see on Indiana Jones, as far as in trying to find the perfect relics to take over the world. And I wonder today if other world leaders do that, but we're just not going to hear about it. Okay, so then I'm back in December now of last year. The tie between realizing you're dreaming, sleep paralysis, and astral projection. So we touched on it a little bit earlier in the stream, but there is something to when you become cognizant in a lucid dream, and the consequences you experience when you make those in your dream aware. When you're dreaming, I do believe that you are in another realm, in a sense. Like, your body is resting, but your soul is somewhere else. And I don't think lucid dreaming itself is inherently wrong. I do think trying to lucid dream intentionally is dangerous, just from my own experience of lucid dreaming. And I don't try to lucid dream, but I can. I find that a lot of times in lucid dreams, we're interacting with, I don't, a lot of times psychologists would say it's our subconscious mind playing out scenes. And they say you can't dream about anyone you've never met. I don't agree with that. They also say you can't have the same dream as someone else, but I also don't agree with that because I've had the same dream as other people that's at the same time, interestingly enough. But what I do find interesting about sometimes some of these people in dreams is that I don't know if any of you guys have had this experience, but I've had experiences where I've had a dream and the people around me, when I got a better look at their faces, they didn't look like people. They looked like people as far as like hair, skin, and clothes. But then if you looked at their features, there was something deformed, something off about them that made me know this is not a human. This is not someone I should be interacting with. It slightly demonic. And then when was made aware of that, that's when everything goes south. And it makes me think of a story. I believe I told it in that video where this man he tried to do like this astral projection type of thing, and pretty much what happened to him was in his dream he was flying and he was having a good time in this dream, and suddenly he noticed he was flying over these people, and then suddenly all the people started to look up at him. And when they all started to look up, he realized that all of their faces were demonic, and he freaked out and he tried to get back into his body. Unfortunately, he did, but I don't believe in messing with that stuff. I don't really understand exactly the line between waking and sleeping and what we're mingling with, because I know dreams can also be from God. I believe that not every dream is a nightmare or bad, but when we try to manipulate it, I think that's when we're more prone to things happening to us. It's like Insidious, where the demon was trying to lure the boy out of his body to take his body over, and that same demon was after the father. I do believe a lot of that has truth to it. Hi, Jeremiah, you mans. And I see you're from Missouri, which is cool because I'm living in Kansas City right now. So not in Kansas City right now in New York, but I am homesick. I can say that. Like, New York's been great, but when you're away from home forever, you're not in your own bed, you get tired. And New York is cool, but it's very loud. The sirens, the people outside, everything's very close corners. And I see Jeremiah also said, I believe there are beings walking among us. I agree. I definitely think it's very plausible. I mean, even given the fact we have so many national parks, we have so much open land, even in the cities. Like, I think even every day when I go outside of this room, like, there's millions of people on the street, and any of them, could be who says they're all 100% human. We could have Nephilim among us. Let's see, hostile human hunting and dark web red rooms. So Hostel, the movie, takes place in Europe, and I believe they're in the, the Netherlands, and they meet these women who they are just like so happy because they think they're gonna have a good time with them sexually, but they lure them to a place where pretty much they are being tormented by wealthy people from around the world who want to basically do a red room type of thing to them. So in the dark web, there's something called a red room, and rooms are these virtual spots where people go. And let me say this about the dark web, because last year I was really, really, really bored and I wanted to know, how do I access the dark web? And so I did some research and I went into the dark web, but I'll say this, most of it is really boring. And you don't just stumble across this stuff by accident. The dark web isn't like the normal web where I can just Google, red dog. No, you have to have a certain link. And the links there are very long, they make no sense. And most of the websites are very much, they look like something coded in the 90s. It's very archaic looking, but it's not about how nice the website looks, it's about accomplishing a task. Now, there are certain popular like links you can look up on the regular web that are on the dark web, like codes, and you can plug those in, or search engines that do help you better find things. and they do claim to be links to things. Anything that was insinuating that it was violent, that it was illegal, I did not try to click on because I'm not trying to see something I don't want to see. And what's crazy about it is that DARPA has control of it. So just let that sink in because some of those links claim that they're child porn, which is disgusting. And I don't want to be a part of that, even if it is a hoax. Just even clicking on that could put you on the FBI's watch list, and that's disgusting. But sorry, I went on a tangent about the dark web. So there are things called red rooms where people are invited and they pretty much pay money in like Bitcoin or one of those cryptocurrencies. And the reason people like to do that is because it's supposedly easier not to trace. And they are real people somewhere being live streamed and tortured. So Hostel was pretty much set in the early 2000s, and these this guy watched all of his friends get tortured, and he was the lone survivor. He too got tortured, but he managed to escape. And I do believe such things do exist, unfortunately. And well, I know they exist because there's been stories about them, not just urban legends. And I do believe outside of just red rooms that people do that because you have some sick people in this world. Just like the whole true crime fascination. I think it's interesting to hear about serial killers, but there are people that get so deep into true crime that they scare me. Like they fangirl or fanboy over serial killers. And it's like, I get it's interesting the psychology of what makes someone do that, but why are you fangirling or boying over someone who murders people? Like, how is that honorable or good? Hi, Shani City Warts. I see Dark Wiki. Yeah, there is the Dark Wiki. If it does help you navigate the dark web. And I see Jeremiah said, I wish I could put on some sunglasses to see them. They live. Yeah, I do. I do think, there are people out there who have the ability to see things others can't. And I'm sure they have some crazy stories about things they've seen, even just on regular people. And then a history on the 9 to 5 work week and how it came to be. So yes, our 9 to 5 work week, that was a whole process. In the past, people weren't working 40 hours a week. That wasn't the norm because we also lived in an agricultural society, so it wasn't sustainable to work 40 hours. But through time, we came to a 40-hour work week, and I think it was in Greece where they said now it's going to be mandated 6 days a week that they work, which is crazy. They're also going through a crazy recession right now. The third man syndrome. So the third man syndrome is fascinating. People who claim to have survived, like car accidents, maybe they survived being in the wilderness because they got lost. They claim that one of the reasons they survived was because this person who actually wasn't there, the third man, someone else, actually helped guide them, almost like an angelic like figure. But then later it was found out that there was not a third person there. And it kind of reminds me of the Bible with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Jesus being that fourth person in this case with them that was seen in the fire, and they actually survived the heat, but everyone who like opened it, they died instantly. So I do believe it is possible that some people are protected and they are guided, and it's not just in their head. They say like maybe people are inventing another person because it's a survival mechanism, but either way, the third man syndrome is definitely an interesting concept. And then jobs least and most likely to be impacted by AI. A lot of jobs that involve like manual labor are going to be the ones that they say are more likely to be impacted just because you can make a machine cook food. You can program a machine to even like teach people, but certain jobs are still going to need humans to perform those tasks. Going down. So I talked earlier about weight loss and food noise, so I'm going to skip over that. Stranger Things, Upside Down, the idea of parallel universe. So Stranger Things, I finally watched that last year, and it's a really good series. I really enjoyed it. they're not coming back with the last season until 2025, which is crazy because all of the actors were very age appropriate, but now they're like all not kids anymore, but yet they're playing high school kids. So that should be interesting. But in Stranger Things, and if you haven't watched it and you want to watch it, then you might want to tune out for a second. Pretty much, they're in this town of Hawkins in Indiana, and there's this parallel universe that is opened up, and it begins to seep out into their world. And there's this girl who was born with psychic abilities, and she's able to use them to combat the evil beings of that world and hold them back, almost like a veil that constantly is being opened. It's a really good series. So, Warhawks and Warmongers, military industrial complex. So, this was mentioned a lot, especially with the war in Gaza. There are people that financially benefit from every time we go to war because they have a vested interest financially. So think of your Raytheons, your um, I don't know. That's the first one coming to my mind right now. But there are other ones that benefit, and pretty much the U.S. is going to buy plenty and plenty of weapons from them, so they're constantly making money off of war, and they like to then have their I'm trying to think of the word for it right now, lobbyists go to Congress to bully politicians, but also get on Fox News, get on CNN, get on MSNBC, and peddle why we need to be at war. But it's not because they really care about the cause, other than they care about lining the pockets of their war machine. Hi, Kendra, love. Hope you're doing well. It's good to see you. And let's see, Midnight Mass, Fallen Angels, the fanaticism, and the drinking the Kool-Aid. So Midnight Mass, I feel again like I'm going back in time mentioning all of these topics because I'm going back to all the videos I did within the last year on that break. And then so I really enjoyed it. At first it was a little slow to me, but it's about vampires. But these vampires are different in a way, and they make it so that the vampire that comes to town is actually the priest, and he brings like the I'm trying to think of the original vampire with him who he encountered in a cave that he thought to be an angel. And he went there as an old man with failing health, and he's bitten, and then he reverts back to his youthful form. And then at the same time, you have, I believe his guy's name was Riley, the main character, and he's back and he has a lot of guilt. He also has given up his faith in God because he had killed a young girl drunk driving, and he has a lot of guilt. And so this man, going back to the priest, he begins to gain traction because he's very good at speaking, and he said he was subbing in for the older priest that had went away. And there are miracles that happen. Like one girl, she manages to start walking again. But we come to find out that these miracles are because he is feeding them bits of the vampiric blood during communion. And so the ultimate plan is during Easter to have a midnight mass to turn everybody into vamps. And so essentially, I go through with that plan, and Riley realizes before that he is a vampire because he tries to turn him, but he ends up deciding to sacrifice himself instead of be turned. And it just all mayhem breaks loose at the end. And the vampires don't get their way to make it off the island because they want it to take over the island and then make it off the island to spread it to other parts. But it did play with this idea of radical fanaticism when it came to religion. And to me, even the concept of the angel was really a vampire. It's really interesting. Um, it was a little, like I said, slow to begin, but it was fascinating for sure. So then Going back, cost of living inflation 2023 outlook. So similar to the 2024 outlook, not much has changed other than things getting more steep. Mirrors and spiritual warfare. So one of my favorite topics, because mirrors to me are fascinating because I do believe they can be used for spiritual reasons. So as you can see behind me, I have mirrors on both sides of my bed. I also have a mirror facing me, and I have another mirror. And a lot of hotels tend to position the mirror so that the mirror faces the bed, which I hate because that's bad feng shui. And I find that sleeping in front of a mirror for me can lead to nightmares and sleep paralysis. I can't always control that. They say the same thing about a television. I just always know if I pray and I don't really think about it, I don't have a lot of problems, but there have been experiences where I have woken up in sleep paralysis from a nightmare where I've seen something come out of the mirror. And a lot of people are so superstitious they cover up their mirrors when they sleep in front of them, or they even believe in quote unquote locking their mirrors. Now, I'm not going to go that far, but definitely mirrors can be used as portals. And you think about people that are psychics or trying to get answers doing divination, they're using a crystal ball. Oftentimes, it's like a mirror into another world. So mirrors can be portals for sure. I jumped away from the list. And I skipped over the gender war as a distraction. So yeah, this gender war, I have not been following it lately, but I know for a time there was just so much content, it was inescapable, of the manosphere, of radical feminists, people saying like this is why you shouldn't get married, men aren't capable of love, women aren't capable of love, and just all this like backbiting between the genders. And I do believe that it was all just a distraction to divide and conquer. As far as a harsh winter of 2023. So 2023 was a pretty cold winter. I hear the same thing about 2024, also supposed to be a rough winter. I guess time will tell. And then the world losing its color. I believe that's going to take us up to that 2 year mark from when I kind of stopped. Let's see. So, as far as the world losing its color, they say that like if you look at Taco Bell or you look at a lot of restaurants, there was just so much more color, even in commercials, and now everything's very dull. It's very corporate, and I do see that with advertising for sure. But we've definitely entered a different time with entertainment. It's crazy though because there are more options than ever for the youth. Like kids today can watch old films like from old Hollywood, but they can also watch like new things. And I hear a lot of people ripping at the current kids today, Gen Alpha, and they're talking about how like they're struggling to read or they're struggling to pay attention because they're the iPad kids. And people roasting millennials for being bad parents to these children. And I'm a millennial, I don't have kids, but I do think that all kids kind of get criticized every generation, just like the youth right now. The Gen Z is being criticized by everyone. But I also think it is harder for kids today because there is so much stimulus with all the screens in front of them. And it is a lot harder. One thing that was really wild to me about some people saying that they had children that they were giving them Christmas list where they didn't want any toys. They wanted like makeup products from Sephora. They wanted a Stanley cup. They wanted Lululemon leggings. Like it sounded like a wish list of someone in their 20s. Like so it was just like where's the fun in that? But I think what it is that a lot of kids today, they can watch anything. So that means some of them are following 25-year-old influencers when they're a 12-year-old. And even though they're nowhere near 25, a lot of them, they kind of want that life that they have. Whereas there's also not a lot of media for kids. Like I hear about Coco Melon, but that's it. Like I know there has to be other things. Those who have kids, I'm sure you can vouch for that. But there's also just a lack of like when I was coming up, I remember there being so many kid shows and so many teen shows and so many tween shows to pick from, which were relatable, so it made you want to be a kid. But today it's kind of like you have really little kid stuff and then you have like adult stuff. And so when a kid is like, I'm not a baby anymore, and then they see some like adult or older teen doing something, they're gravitating towards that as well. I remember even with the whole Sephora thing, they were saying like kids were going into Sephora and trashing the store and adults didn't want to be in there anymore. So I don't know. They said even like some kids, like, they had like summer school and the kids couldn't name like all 50 states, or they didn't know that Phoenix was a country instead of a city in the US. So again, time will tell how things pan out for Gen Alpha, or just like we'll see with Gen Z as they get older. But so much is changing day by day, and we live in a crazy world. But thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to this long-winded discussion. I'm going to close out in a prayer, and then if anyone has any last minute things they want me to talk about, we can do that. But I thought I'd hop on for an hour because I'm rusty at this. It's been a while since I've done a live stream, and I was nervous to do it, but I was like, I want to talk to you guys. It's been 2 years and we need a check-in. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. Father, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come together to fellowship and to just discuss everything going on in the world and different theories and everything else. I just pray that everyone listening, whether they're listening live or they're listening to this in playback mode, would have a wonderful week and weekend as well. And I just ask that you would continue to guide and protect everyone and help anyone through any situations that they're facing, Father. Give everyone discernment. Help us to be led by you. And thank you for everything that you continue to do in everyone's life. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in. It's always a pleasure. And I'm looking here at the chat. I saw a couple of things. So before I sign off, I just want to see. SC said, talk more about the nostalgia. I'm in the nostalgia trap, born 1987. I can't stand 2024 and dream of old times. It's my escape. And then the dream detective said, hi, Dazz. Good to see you. Grace be with you and all overcomers. Thank you. And hello to SC and to Dream Detective. So SC, I would say with the nostalgia trap, because it's a big thing for a lot of people. 2024, honestly, it has felt like just a weird year. It has definitely felt like one of those things that it's easy to use escapism. What you're describing reminded me of a girl I heard. She's born in 91, but few years behind you. And she was saying how like for her comfort is watching like old sitcoms and stuff, because 2024 is really, it's very dry in a way. I don't think, again, there's anything wrong with, admiring the era that you felt most comfortable in, watching stuff that reminds you of childhood. But I would say with that, I would say definitely pray about it, but also, unfortunately, change is inevitable. Like, sometimes I think back to like, I don't know, 12 years ago in 2012. And, I liked that time period, the 2010s. But things are not the 2010s. Trends come back, they come and go. But a lot of things, like I mentioned earlier, are cyclical. So you probably have seen things from when you were born, or even like when you were younger, cycle back, fashion, phrases, because people recycle things from the past. And it's nothing wrong with admitting like 2024 is just blah, because it is for a lot of people right now on so many levels. But with it, the fact you're aware of it is good, because some people, they get so lost in la la land of like nostalgia. It's like they can't escape it, and it is tough. It is. But I do believe, as many things are getting crazier, that some things do eventually get better. Any other questions, comments? I'll give it a minute. Again, it was a pleasure talking to everyone. I thought when I was starting this, I would probably be talking to myself for an hour, but that's good as well. And I see that the Dream Detective said we are in the spiritual journey to promised land. This is our story. Amen to that. And that's true. At the end of the day, it's about finishing the race. And that is essentially our purpose, because a lot of things around us are meant to distract us in a way. And you're welcome, SC. All right, so we're at an hour, and thank you everyone again for tuning in, or who will tune in later. And I'll talk to you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. God bless.